Podcasting, the latest frontier. These are the episodes of a Catch as Catch Can podcast. Its continuing mission: to explore strange, nerdy topics, to chat about sports, movies, sci-fi, and so much more. To boldly pod where this nerd has gone before.
Captain's log, pod date 0825.19. On this episode of Too Boldly Pod, it's going to be a short little, well, not necessarily time-wise short, but subject short. I get long-winded about a couple of things. So, we're going to talk about the Sixth Doctor, sort of review my latest watching of the Sixth Doctor in the Doctor Who series. We're going to kick off the college football season with a little chat about college football and some of your predictions as to what you think will be the 4 teams in the playoffs this year. And I made a little musings from my vacation I just finished off. I'll play that for everybody, and then we'll have a little bit of fun with what's in the news. So, Scotty, set phasers on stun, engage. Well, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, you know I'm sort of a nerd and I enjoy things of the sci-fi variety. And you also know that I'm a huge fan of the program Doctor Who. I've talked about it many times here on this podcast, and I sort of do this faux review. At least it's my excuse to watch the show. I watch each Doctor, and then I come on here and I sort of disseminate and talk about them. And yeah, as I said, an excuse to watch the show over and over again. And I just recently finished watching the Sixth Doctor and his episodes, and they were more of the mid-'80s Doctor Who episodes, and the Sixth Doctor was portrayed by Colin Baker. And before we get into too much of the synopsis of his tenure, a couple of firsts happen for, well, not necessarily one wasn't a first, but it was a modern day first, I suppose you could say. One thing that the Sixth Doctor was good for is John Davison, the Fifth Doctor, regenerated into the Sixth Doctor with one episode left in his season. So normally it's, you end off a season with the Doctor regenerating and you kick off the brand new season with a brand new Doctor. But this one, for whatever reason, and I couldn't really find or never heard a reason why they did it this way, but it was sort of a different way to do it. And the other sort of first or standout for the Sixth Doctor's tenure was 2 things, actually. One was they expanded into a new time format as opposed to the old style 25-minute episodes into 45-minute episodes. And if you're not familiar too much with the old way they did the show, stories broke down into 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks, and you'd get 20-minute episodes each week, and they tied them all together into what they called serials. So that's how they did it then. And when the Sixth Doctor started is when they tried to go to a 45-minute format, which only lasted his first season, and then they dropped back down into the standard Whovian way of 25 to 26 minutes per episode, which ran until the show was ultimately canceled in 1989. Now, if you're a fan of the new Doctor Who, you know that all the episodes now are anywhere between 45 to 50 minutes to an hour plus long. So they've kind of gone back to that, but that's sort of standard for British TV now. Anyways, now, that means all that stuff out of the way. One thing I will say before I get into sort of my critique or talking about it is the Sixth Doctor, I mean, even though they claim 3 seasons, he really was only on for 2 seasons, though, like I said, 1 episode finished off the 5th Doctor's season. So he was on from March 84 until December of 1986, and he is also sort of synonymous for being the Doctor when the show was put on hiatus. Ratings were dropping, and the BBC wasn't sure whether they were going to cancel the show or not. So they decided, instead of canceling it, to sort of give it an 18-month hiatus and kind of rework the show. And Colin Baker, who portrayed the Sixth Doctor, was still under contract, but they had decided they wanted to move on to a different Doctor after the 18 months, and they wanted him to come back just to do a regeneration scene, and he was so butthurt about that, he said no. So the regeneration from the 6th Doctor to the 7th Doctor was actually the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, dressed up as Colin Baker, and that's how they sort of cheesily did that in the 1980s. And the other thing that's sort of atypical for, well, it's actually true of the 6th and 7th Doctor, is each of them, a lot of times in the Doctor's tenures, you had a lot of companion turnover, and with these two, the 6th and the 7th, that each of them only had 2. The 6th Doctor had Perry, who had joined actually the 5th Doctor's final episode, so it was sort of introducing her at the same time, but he also had Mel, which just happens to be my least favorite Doctor, my least favorite companion, but more about that later. So, that being said, one thing I will say about the 6th Doctor's tenure is they really started off sort of poking or leading you to believe that he was going to be a much darker Doctor than previous incarnations were. He regenerated, and the regeneration, quote unquote, didn't go perfectly, so Perry was there and he was choking her, so that led you to think he was going to be more of an almost evil Doctor. But they really abandoned that thought quickly. Actually, I think after that first episode, he really wasn't the darker, more evil Doctor like they kind of set in motion at the beginning of his regeneration. And his first season was, like I said, this was done in the mid-80s, so you had a lot of the 80s effects. They spent a lot of time in more of a space setting than you got with the 4th and 5th Doctors, whether it was, budgetary or sign of the times or what. So you got a lot more spacier episodes with the 6th Doctor in his first season. Now, when it came to his final season, they did something sort of unique, and it was they had an entire season long kind of, the whole story was one whole season. I mean, there was different stories in each episode, but the entire season was one long marathon of a story called The Trial of the Time Lords, and that's where they put him on trial. The Time Lords would be, his race, and they brought him home and put him on trial. But I digress. I don't want spoilers. Anyways, to me, and everything that I've read about it that was sort of what killed it, because people didn't enjoy that sort of storyline that they went with, or arc, if you will. But to me, I thought that was really a well done story for not just his tenure, but all of Doctor Who. It was a very intriguing storyline, very well done. And I know there was various writers, because a couple of the writers, or one of the writers, passed away. The initial writer passed away, so you really didn't get the closure that the initial idea writer wanted, or maybe we did, I don't know. But a lot of people, debated that was why they thought it failed so much. But I thought it was actually one of the better done stories in all of Doctor Who Lair. Now, where would I rank the Sixth Doctor in terms of all the other Doctors? He's probably, I'd say, middle of the pack. But I will say, and I've rewatched them all numerous times, and not gonna lie, I generally tend to watch the newer episodes and the first 4 Doctors more, and for whatever reason, I kind of skim over 5, 6, and 7, which happens to be the ones in the 80s. Though I did watch them all this time, kind of staying true to my review of the show. So all in all, he gained some more appreciation from me this viewing. Maybe I spent better attention to it or whatnot, but he still ranks, to me, as far as favorite ranking the Doctors, he goes somewhere in the middle. But I will say, as I teased a little bit ago, my least favorite companion of all time happened to start with the 6th Doctor and lead into the 7th Doctor. And when I review the 7th Doctor, I'm pretty sure you're going to get a long rant about Mel. So if you have any thoughts about the 6th Doctor, let me know on Facebook or Twitter at TooBoldlyPod, and we will move on next time to talk about the 7th Doctor and the ultimate cancellation, at least temporarily, 15 years, of Doctor Who.
Well, you've heard me do musings from my work van, but now I'm going to do musings from my vacation. More specifically, the last day of my vacation. The day I head home from vacation. And I've spent the last few days in northern Michigan, and let me just say that I absolutely love it here in northern Michigan. I love the openness, the wilderness, the sun, how laid back it is, how peaceful it seems to be up here. And it's not saying that I'm a city dweller by no stretch of the means. I live in a small town. But this is just, there's something different about up here as opposed to back home. It's just peaceful, it's calm, it's tranquil, it's enjoyable. And maybe it's just because I was on vacation, I don't know. But for the past 25 years, my family has been coming to this small family-owned campground. And each year every family has a bit of drama in it, so it seems like every year there's something that happens that makes you roll your eyes, but that's irrelevant. But for the past 25 years, my family has been coming here, and we've been having a wonderful time. And this year was no different. We did have a very wonderful time. I will say my only caveat to it is this year kind of proved to me that I'm more isolationist than I am the in crowd or in with a crowd, because this place was packed from wall to wall with other campers. And I'm not saying that is a down thing. I mean, it's their business. They can do what they want. They shouldn't curtail to my family whatsoever. I mean, everyone else's money is just as good as ours. But as a personal preference, I just prefer a little more solitude, if you will, a little more aloneness, a little more quiet. So I wish it would have been less packed in here than it normally is, or than it was this year. So, and the other thing that I will say is, well, a couple other things to say is, two, my family listens to this. They've been wondering all weekend why I just got up and went off on my own. And they were curious if there was something wrong. Well, no, there's nothing wrong. There's times when I want to be by myself. I want to be with my thoughts. And I just took those opportunities to go in my tent, go in my car, go for a walk, and just think. That's all it was. Simple as that. It has nothing to do with my family. Nobody cheesed me off. It's just how I am. I enjoyed an occasional bit of solitude. And finally, as I head back into society, back home, I'm happy to be going home because I missed everybody. So I'm looking forward to getting back to my Spock Rock crew, Kelly and Kate and Dave and Jason and Juliana and Jenny and Jason and Amy and all of you. I missed my friends. I missed Narek and Andrea. I missed all of you. And I'm ready to get back to doing the podcast, to doing Spock Rock Radio, hopefully rejuvenated, and we can dive into the rest of 2019 with a passion. So to my family, thank you. It was a wonderful time for the past 5 days. To Beaver Trail Campground, thank you. I had a great time. Thank you for taking care of our one minor little issue that we had. And all of you, I hope you're looking forward to many hours of me. That's all I got.
Well, by the time any of you are listening to or hearing this, the college football season will officially be underway. But at the time of me recording it, it has yet to begin. So, that being said, are we all ready for some football? Yeah, that's probably the most old, hackneyed phrase that you can ever get from anybody. But anyways, I'm excited for football this year. Not just college football, but, pro football too, because football is football. And there was a great debate on the radio the other day on terrestrial sports talk about whether people are more excited for fall, which indicates the end of summer, or are they sad that summer is coming to an end? And it's kind of a hard dichotomy to decide which one people are more excited for. If they'd rather have summer hang on for a little longer and not have football, or excited for summer to be over and football to start. Me, I'm a fall guy. I'm not a big fan of winter, but I can deal with it. So I'm excited for fall to get going. And as I stated at the beginning of this rant, college football officially starts today or yesterday or a few days ago or whenever it is you actually listen to this podcast. And that being said, I asked people on social media, with college football kicking off today, who are your 4 teams you think will make it to the college football playoffs? Easy for me to say. And what team do you think could be a dark horse to get in? And I got a couple of responses. I expected a little bit more, but you know what? I sort of asked the question late. So it is what it is. So thanks to noted author W.C. Hoffman and my buddy Dave for answering. And W.C. Hoffman said Alabama, Clemson, LSU, and Michigan make the playoffs. And I'm assuming his dark horse is Georgia. And then he said in parentheses, Jake Fromm, Heisman. It'd be interesting to get 3 teams from one conference in the playoffs. I mean, I'm assuming Alabama and Clemson are basically shoo-ins. LSU and Michigan, so I guess you could swap LSU and Georgia, but I don't know, that'd be weird. But anyways, interesting thought. And then Dave said Clemson, Alabama, Washington, and Georgia? Question mark. And then his sleeper team was Texas with about 15 question marks. And I will freely admit I stole this little idea from terrestrial sports talk, which I tend to steal a lot of my ideas from. But you know what? That's what they're there for, to give me ideas for this podcast. And the big debate going on during the week for sports talk was whether the Big Ten was going to get shut out again for like the 3rd year in a row. And to me, I mean, you have to go with the 2 favorites, which are Alabama and Clemson. And I actually don't think this year you're going to get 2 teams from the SEC into the playoffs. So that kind of rules out Georgia. And do I think the Big Ten is going to get into the playoffs this year? Yeah, actually, I kind of think they do. And a lot of my friends and local Michigan listeners aren't going to like to hear this, but I actually think Ohio State is going to make the playoffs. Because, and then more about that in a minute. And my 4th team, I think, and I could totally be wrong, is going to be Oklahoma. Now, here's the thing about that, is when I thought about dark horses, it's like, could you possibly get 2 Big Ten teams into the playoffs? Nah, that's not going to happen. 2 Big 12 teams? No, that's probably not going to happen. Although I don't know if I necessarily buy the whole Texas hype. I'm enough of a Michigan fan, and I'm so fed up with hype that I'm getting to the point where I don't really want hype. I want to see results. So that being said, I think my sleeper team is going to come from the West, the oft-forgotten West Coast. And I think that team is Georgia. No, not Georgia. Georgia's not in the West, you dumbass. Anyways, bad. Sorry, trying to be funny. Wasn't. Anyways, my sleeper team, I think this year could possibly be the Washington Huskies. Yeah, that's why I don't do stand-up like W.C. Hoffman, because I'm not funny. So there you have it. Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, and Oklahoma in the playoffs. Sleeper team for me, Washington. And going to the Big Ten, being a little more hometown-centric, I mentioned that I'm sick of the hype. And a lot of people, national pundits, are giving Michigan the nod to win the Big Ten. But you know what? They have a big mountain to cross. And just because Urban Meyer is gone does not necessarily mean that they're immediately going to be handed the Big Ten title. because you know what? You sort of have an unproven new offensive system. The defense lost a lot of its players, and I know they kind of reloaded a little bit, and Don Brown is a genius of a coach, defensive coach, but they still have a lot to prove. And a lot of people are just shooing aside that little team from East Lansing, and maybe they got their offense fixed with a new system set in place this year. And people forget that defense that Mark D'Antonio has, that's a pretty damn good defense. So don't sleep on Michigan State this year either. And on the west side of the Big Ten, a lot of people are throwing hype at Nebraska's way. And I guess we'll find out whether Scott Frost is the second coming of Tom Osborne or not, because this would be the year that we find out. So that being said, looking forward to a lot of great football conversation here in the coming months on this podcast and on social media. If you have any thoughts about your predictions for the college football playoff and maybe your sleeper team or your favorite team, let me know on Facebook or Twitter at TooBoldlyPod. And in the news this week, and this comes from rare.us and written by a fellow by the name of Rob Fox. It's from August 22nd of this year, and the headline is, "Woman arrested for chugging beer like Stone Cold Steve Austin, then assaulting her boyfriend." A Florida man, why is it always a Florida man? A Florida man was just trying to help out his girlfriend. Cody Lee Havens, 26, thought Chastity Bodnar, 23, drank too much, and out of his concern for her well-being, he told her as much. Well, maybe that's what happened. But considering how Chastity responded to Cody's lifestyle critique, it might just as likely be that Cody was tired of Chastity passing out on the couch covered in Doritos and Papa John's garlic butter sauce and then peeing herself. Just reading the article, folks. Why is that generally possible? Because upon hearing that she may be have a drinking problem, Chastity, who was drinking at the time, became furious and responded to Cody by throwing her phone and hitting him in the throat. She then followed him out to the garage of their Fort Pierce, Florida home, took 2 cans of beer, slammed them together, chugged them, and then proceeded to physically assault Cody. So, do I really need to say it? Do I really? What? Do I really? What? Do I really? What? Sorry, Dave will get that. What the hell is wrong with mankind? Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Too Boldly Pod. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Coming up in future podcasts, we're going to talk about the kickoff of the 2019-2020 NFL season. We're also still putting together our special Too Boldly Pod Halloween spectacular show, and we're going to talk a little bit about unidentified flying objects. And as usual, I don't have a closer for this, so I will just quote Futurama and say, "Looking like that, talked his way into Jill St. John's bed. 'Nuff said." Talk to all of you next time.
WLLP Spock Rock Radio.